Brooklyn Independent Television.
So I'm going to start with you, Malik. You've been a photographer for over 20 years. Is that the case? So can you talk a little bit about how hip-hop and specifically how Video Music Box has influenced you as a photographer and artist?
I feel spotlighty. Well, to tell you the truth, to start as an artist, I was just a straight b-boy, you know what I mean? So I didn't turn to photography. I was a b-boy and a skater, you know, and then I didn't hit photography until I was 15 and I needed a summer job. So, you know, my mom knew someone that kind of hooked me up. But what it has done to me is I sort of kind of carried that graffiti artist kind of thing over into my art as a photographer. So I kind of always saw in that kind of style, and Video Music Box was always like the continuous source of information. You know what I mean? It was always like, you know, that was home. You know what I mean? I can go home and then turn on my little black and white I had in my room, and with the pliers, and see it. And I saw, you know, my people. That's why like my piece is called Black Box, because it was like, these are reflections of me, you know, out there, what I wanted to do and what, you know, the look that I wanted to have, and, you know, everything. So it was like always like the reference, you know, the source, and always able to go back to that and say, oh yeah, that's, you know, what's going on now? What's the new, you know, thing? What's the new style? What's the new word? Like I heard say before, you know, but basically that's what it was, the source.
Anyone else want to?
Well, I grew up listening to hip-hop music, like literally grew up with hip-hop music. And so when I became a photographer, I was actually studying jazz photography, just, you know, dabbling in books. I studied film in school, and then I realized that you could tell stories with photography as well. And through looking at the jazz photography, I said, wow, I could do this with hip-hop culture. And so I really got my first my first photography work in the field of hip-hop just in the 90s, when it was very different, you know, like you'll just be walking down the street and there's Method Man and you're taking a picture, you know, and going to like the Palladium, and like my whole world was like the Palladium, you know, Mars, all these different places where it was like, I wasn't around during that time, but it was the 60s for me, where I'm sure, you know, James Brown and this one, you know, they were having conversations, and I feel like that's how the 90s was. And so that was me in the middle, just documenting everything. And as far as Ralph McDaniels, I remember he came to my school to do Video Music Box at Stony Brook. And I got to do my little, I want to give a shout out to everybody in Brooklyn, and became like the local celebrity on my block. But that day, I knew I wanted to be in entertainment. I wasn't sure, at this point I wasn't a photographer. I knew that I wanted to do something in entertainment. So I was one of those people who was like, you know, if I see somebody, I'm gonna ask them, you know. So I told him, I said, you know, I would love to do an internship with you. And he gave me his card, and I called him, and like on my next break home, I had an interview with him, and I got my first job working on a music video through Ralph McDaniels. Oh, wow. And ever since then, it's always been like sometimes I don't even know if he remembers that story, but he knows my face. So he would always just, you know, it was all love. And I know that so many people came up through that type of love and support, you know, for young people just trying to do their thing. And so the work in the show, I have this video over here, which is kind of a dedication to hip-hop lyrics. So I just asked random people, what is your favorite hip-hop quotable, and pieced together all of these quotes, because I feel like hip-hop culture, the actual content of the music could be, like you have the thing about the grade levels. I took Rakim into the classroom, and we had to really break it down. Like you can't not know how to read and understand Rakim's lyrics. So I wanted to kind of bring, you know, play with that idea with this film. And then I have a series, I'm working on a series of African hip hop. So I'm just really inspired as how hip hop has traveled around the world, and, you know, going to West Africa and really interviewing artists and just getting a grasp of the culture there, it's so interesting to see how the influences of hip hop is there, but then even the influences of Africa in hip hop. So it's like this cross-cultural connection, and it's an amazing project that's coming along. And then finally there's one piece of African Bambaataa that is just during my early days. This is probably like my second year as a photographer. And it's a symbolic piece about just, you know, how hip hop brought peace to the community. That particular photo was taken at Q-Tip, and someone from Rex and Effect got into a fight. And someone was punched in the face. And this meeting was about bringing peace between the two of them. So at this meeting, they all came together. You had the Nation of Islam, everyone from, you know, African Bambaataa, you see Crazy Legs. All of the hip hop community came out to have peace between these two brothers, and it was an amazing event. So I was just happy to be there and be able to, you know, now share the story with you all, just to see like how strong hip hop was back then.
Hey, could I grab that for a second? Okay. I just want to add something to that, because it's funny you're talking about like the early beginnings. So one day back in 19 years ago, I called Delphine and I said, yeah, I'm working with this clothing company. I'm the PR director, and I need your help with something. She's like, well, what is it? And I was like, I need you to take some photographs of this rap group. I think they're gonna be big, but but just believe in me. Just do me this favor. So she meets me in Brooklyn Heights. So we're waiting, and then like a Toyota Camry pulls up, and jumping out of the Toyota Camry is Lauryn Hill and Wyclef and Froswell, before anyone really cared or knew who they were. And we spent the whole day shooting the Fugees in Brooklyn Heights. And it was a weird experience, looking back on that, because, just in the bagel shop, like, what do you want, Lauren? I don't know, I want coffee, And then, just a few years later, she wins like 8 Grammys, and, the rest is history, you all know that. But that's what she's kind of talking about. There was this magical period of time in the 90s that it just seemed that you could be anywhere and meet anyone, and there was no barriers or pretense. I just wanted to share that, because I always think about that story.
I think my first experience with Video Music Box was like when I was maybe like 8 or 9 years old, and I used to play on the block, and after school I would hang out at the neighbor's apartment, and we'd watch cartoons all night, all afternoon. And I was really into my cartoons, and I'd get really upset when somebody would turn off DuckTales and then turn to Video Music Box. But then, eventually I just got used to it, and like the intro, the 5 minutes of funk, it became hypnotic. And it was something that I just kind of got in the groove with, and I saw it as just a vessel to be able to see hip-hop culture. And not like 8, 9 years old, I really didn't have any other opportunity to see that kind of thing. So it just became just a source of entertainment that focused on hip-hop and things that I was interested in and people who looked like me. And it became very inspirational. And like over the years, I've seen some of my favorite music videos on Video Music Box, and just even the behind the scenes footage at the clubs with the artists. That was stuff I couldn't see at 8, 9 years old in the club. So it was really awesome, and it wound up influencing me in terms of, including hip hop and visual art together.
And Tahir, could you talk a little bit about how hip hop's influenced your work? But actually, could you tell us a little bit about your work?
Sure. Well, I want to give props to Ralph first and Video Music Box. I remember, I'm in junior high school, and we're playing handball, wearing BVDs, we're wearing pinstripe Lees, suede Pumas, just doing our thing. There's battles after school sometimes, that kind of thing. But at a certain point, we all stop and we make sure we go home to watch ourselves on TV, basically, to watch what we were making and what we were doing be reflected on TV, on the television. Like, it was on channel 31, and there were like 2 channels. There were like 2 stations, VHF and UHF. And I think 31 was on UHF. It was ultra high frequency. So sometimes with the pliers, sometimes you have to it came in a little fuzzy. I didn't have public access. It was public, but it was, it was, so we would go home and see ourselves, see our haircuts, on TV when people were getting like mad parts in the side of their heads and Gumbies, and we see the Gucci girls dancing in the back in videos. Like we would see just our culture. So that's the personal relationship. And in terms of my art, what I'm realizing now is that Video Music Box it's because of the amount of time that I spent documenting the culture. It's a cultural archive. So now, I've seen this video like a zillion times, right? So the first 3 times, the first 3 years, I watch it one way, but now I'm watching, okay, what kind of hat is Run wearing? Okay, what kind of sweater is Homegirl in the audience wearing? Like, is that a Pippo suit? Like, is that, a Coca-Cola rugby? Like, what's going on? So in terms of like archiving the culture and looking at details like that, I guess in that way, that like Video Music Box has influenced this current project, and it's the hip hop word count, and it's an online searchable database of all the language in hip hop from 1979 till today, and right now the lyrics from 40,000 songs, and they're analyzed for, like Dexter said, word count, syllable count, polysyllabic words, a lot of syntax. The education level needed to be able to read the lyrics with meaning, so from like elementary school to postdoctorate. And there's geocodes for the rappers, where they're from and where they're born, and there's release dates for the album. So what happens is it's building a geography of the language in hip hop. Like now there's data and there's math and there's a project that will help us investigate those kinds of things.
Cool. So Ralph, if you could give us just a couple minutes on sort of where Video Music Box is today.
Well, we're celebrating 30 years in next year, 2013, and this was the beginning of the actual celebration for 30 years. And so, it's important for me to, and I talk to guys that grew up watching Video Music Box, let's say in the 80s, to understand where they're coming from, and they're like, yo, hip hop is not like it used to be, man. I wish it was like that. I said, well, look, nothing is like how it used to be. So you got to get over it and look at what's happening now. You love what you love from the 80s and the 90s, or you like the 2000 era, or you don't like what's going on now, or you like what's going on now. I'll meet a 13-year-old who loves Big Sean. They love Big Sean. They love Lil Wayne. They love Nicki Minaj, and that's what they're all about. So I have to be aware of what Big Sean, Lil Wayne, and and all these artists, Meek Mill, Rick Ross, are doing. So I try to stay abreast of what they're doing. I think that from the 80s, I've been talking about balance in hip hop, and that's just not in, well, it's a balance of the message that we put out there. In 89, or 87, I did a video called, that I produced and my partner directed, called Self-Destruction. And, it was, thank you. And, it was needed. At that time, if people know from that era, gold chains were being snatched at rap concerts. And literally, just like you talk about Cristal being, Jay-Z kind of dead in the whole Cristal thing, in, over a summer, KRS-One said, let's take the gold chains off and we'll go leather medallions. And it happened over a summer. People stopped wearing gold chains like that. So, that took the thugs out of the picture. Now they didn't want to snatch your Africa gold chain, your Africa leather chain. So, it's important that we have balance in the music. I think that what has happened, since that time is that we've had, corporate America, get into the game. And I mean, they've been there all along, but, really industrializing what's happening in hip hop and just making it into this like advertising movement. And that's what it's all about. It's not about listening to Hot 97 right now for the music. It's about getting you to the next commercial. That's what it's all about. And that's why everything kind of sounds homogenized and sounds the same. So I'm totally against that. So when you watch my show, I'll play Rick Ross and then I'll play KRS-One behind it. Or I'll play Rick James, or I'll play Bob Marley, or I'll play Shabba. I'm just giving you good music. So that's what we do still in in 30 years from, from 1983 and 2013, that's what we still continue to do. We, we slow the pace down a little bit because it seems to me like hip hop moves really fast. I couldn't tell you, whose album came out when. I don't remember the last release date on a recent artist anymore. We used to look forward to the release date of an artist back in the days, so we could go to a record store and buy a record or an album or a CD or a cassette or whatever it was. That was a great experience, to do. Plus, it brought us together because, if I thought I knew about all of the stuff that was coming out, then this sister was over here buying something else that I heard of, I knew nothing about, but I was curious because she was really excited about it. So I wanted to go find out what that was about that she was buying. So we don't have that experience necessarily. I mean, I guess it does happen in, on the internet. You kind of read people's comments and stuff about stuff. But I mean, that interaction with each other, is not really there. And that's just not in hip hop, that's in music and things in general. But we try to bring back that, the industry is totally, against, like, why is Ralph doing what he does? He can't play an old school song behind Wayne, or he can't do that. I'm like, why not? Because, maybe somebody does like Lil Wayne, and maybe this kid doesn't know anything about Big Daddy Kane, and maybe this is the first time he's really seeing Big Daddy Kane. He might have heard the song, but maybe he never saw the video because they don't play videos on TV anymore. So we continue to, be a breeding ground for young artists. I do think of myself as an artist. I have to keep people watching still tonight from 12 midnight to 1 for an hour. There's no commercials and no hype commercials in between my stuff. There's no heavy promotions in between my stuff. It's just whatever I choose to put on there, and I got to keep you for an hour. That's not easy to keep anybody's attention for an hour in 2013, so that's what we're doing.
Great. So talk about your relationship with hip hop today.
Okay. My relationship with hip hop today it's weird. It's also a love, not love situation, like Delphine said. But I find, like, at least visually, that it doesn't have the same appeal to me as it did when I was growing up, when I was a teenager. When I was like 15 or 16 and watching Video Music Box, I used to see like really creative music videos, or stuff that seemed true to the culture, or just a representation of what was going on in the culture. And now it just seems like everything is really fake and plastic. And the videos no longer really tell a story. It's more about flaunting, jewelry or cars, or now the big thing is liquor. These liquor companies are putting money into videos for them to get made. And now you'll just see like these blatant shots of, Nuvo or Ciroc or something else. And it doesn't help the story at all, and it just becomes a big commercial. And I think that's what a lot of hip hop is these days. It's just a commercial for you to go out and buy something else. And I really wish, there are certain artists out there who are making stories and really telling their stories visually as well, but you usually have to go to the underground to find that kind of thing, and it's not very present in the mainstream. And I try, at least in my own work, to tell a story or to convey some type of information, or at least give an example of how the artists themselves are living, or what they're doing, or what their personality or character is like. But as far as the mainstream is, most stuff is fake. Everybody's the same person. They got the same shots in the video with the crew and the gold teeth, and it's just overboard right now. It really seems like a caricature of what hip hop used to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, Barbito Garcia is in the house. It's actually a good idea to start with Barbito. Barbito is one of the artists that's in the show, and but beyond that, he's a pioneer and a. I'm not going to get into your bio. I want you to answer that question as someone who's been very much involved in hip hop culture. If someone were to ask you who owns it, what would your reply be?
My gut reaction to the question, which is a deep one, and could be addressed in a lot of different ways, and would be addressed differently 20 years ago than it would now that I'm 45. But I really defer to the judgment of Africa Bambaataa, who I interviewed a number of times in the last 20, 25 years for various causes and reasons. And he once said to me, he said, "You know what, Bob, hip-hop, culture, movement, foundation, music has no race to it, has no gender to it, has no assignment. It's open to everybody." And the original tenets of his his vision in the 70s was really to be as inclusive as possible as it could be. And for that, you know, he would invite Malcolm McLaren, punk rock from, you know, UK up to the Bronx to check out jams, and that was always his. So if we think about deeply and really hold dear his words, then in that respect, then none of us own it. You know, not you, not I, not Ralph, not the biggest selling artist, not the corporate corporations, nor the kid on the street. It's for everyone to interpret and to respect.
A lot of young people can't separate reality from fantasy when it comes to hip-hop music. The same way they can separate reality from fantasy when they're watching a Rambo film. They never think that Sylvester Stallone actually does all of the things that he does in the film. I think it's really creating a lot of problems for teenagers.
Well, I think it's interesting you said it because I was, I guess, blessed to have the opportunity to be like one of the first photographers to photograph Biggie. And, you know, because we lived in the neighborhood, and plus I was doing a lot of work for Puffy or Diddy or whatever you can call it at the time. And Sean Combs. So, but when I was photographing him, you wouldn't believe, like, it was the nicest dude. Like, Biggie was the nicest dude. I mean, you'd be like real nice, like, hey, what's going on, man? You know, da, da, da. But when it was time to put on the show, he really put, and he told me, I mean, I remember this. He told me, he says, man, when I come out, I'm going to be the biggest, darkest thing on the block. He told me that. You know what I mean? And I was like, word, okay. You know what I mean? I was just taking pictures because at the time, I didn't know who Biggie was. You know what I mean? I'm sitting in the office and he's, you know, laughing and joking. He was just a regular guy. You know what I mean? But, you know, he said that. You know what I mean? And he knew that that's what he had to do to be able to, you know, to come out and be the best. Because, I mean, you listen to songs like Juicy and you go, all right, yeah, that's a dope song. But then you listen to, you know, any of these other joints that's so hard, and those are the ones that you're like, yeah, yo, that's the one, like, you know. And he knew that for his style, I mean, I'm victim to it too. You know, I love the heart of Biggie joints, you know what I mean? But, and I didn't like Juicy, sorry. But, you know, but those are the ones he knew that his style and his technique, and you know what I mean? And then everybody saw that, and everybody was like, yo, I gotta be like that. And you know what I mean? Just like you said, now it's like all the cameras, everything, the media is everywhere. So like you said, you gotta be that all the time. And then once you start doing that, you just start convincing yourself that that's who you are. You know what I mean? And then like coming off of that, it's like, oh, wait a minute, who am I? Like, am I this other person? You know what I mean? I think that's when a lot of people start going crazy.
Could you address like worldwide, so the rest of the world is looking and they don't know it's a fantasy?
Can I address
Maybe.
This is a question I definitely would like to get Barbito's feedback on, and also you as well, Bill.
So with regards to that, that's a beautiful point. I was blessed to be the first U.S. hip-hop personality to ever perform in post-apartheid South Africa. And that was in 2000 on the very weekend celebration of the formation of the African National Congress. And when I was out there, I didn't acknowledge the fact, you know, being, I mean, I'm decently well-read and college graduate and everything else, until I went there, and, you know, the brothers out there were like, yo, why do cats in, you know, the hip-hop videos wear so much jewelry? Like, are they aware that, you know, the mines are here and people have 40-year, you know, life expectancy, and, you know, and then they started breaking down to me, like, you know, the whole diamond conflict. I mean, everything. I learned everything about that, like, you know, 12 years ago. And what I realized is that, you know, there's a disconnect on both sides. I mean, maybe not so much now, because the world is definitely, you know, amongst the network has been able to connect a lot better. But at some point, what I explained to them, I said, look, a lot of people throughout the diaspora may not be knowledge about what's going on back home. And on the same token, like, a lot of you may not know what's going on, you know, in terms of the jewelry and what it means.
Delphine, you've done a lot of work in various countries in Africa, documenting hip hop, particularly in these countries. Could you just for literally a minute or two, just kind of tell us what that experience has been like?
one thing that I found very interesting in Ghana is like with the when everyone was doing bling bling over here and all of this jewelry, like I met a person who makes handcrafted beads and he collects beads from all over Africa, and he created these beautiful medallions for all of the rappers in Ghana, and they all wear that, and they're like, this is what represents us, and they'll break it down for you. Or even like some of the signals, like one of the photos is hiding behind there, but there are 2 rappers that I met in Senegal, and incorporating their beliefs in the rhyme. Like the guy has his hand like this. Like people will be like, oh, is that a gang sign? No, but it stands for 7 eye, and it's a spiritual thing. And there's another one who had like the 4 that represented the first 4 people who lost their lives in the revolution. So you find some of these things within the music, and that is inspired by what they went through, and the hip hop that was socially conscious and aware, and so it's twofold, because on one end you also have people who are inspired by using hip-hop as a tool for social change, and that's something that was done here as well, so it's it's not a clear-cut answer as far as what messages are being sent, but I think there is diversity in the messages that are being sent, but I really think that more needs to be done about educating ourselves here and the education over there.
First of all, give it up for Dexter, the curator. He put this all together. And what's interesting is when Dexter put this together, I thought it was going to be all my pictures on the wall. And then he was like, no, we're going to have other people come in. So, and I was like, what? And so this whole experience has been very interesting for me. But one of the things I wanted to say, and as a young person, I can remember, I think it was public school, we had a class trip and we went to, I think it was Museum of Natural History or the Hayden Planetarium. I think it was the Hayden Planetarium. And they had this thing that would like project up on the ceiling, and it was a show. And that was the biggest influence in my life, sitting in that room in the dark, looking at the ceiling and looking at that. And that is where all of this, then here it is, X amount of years later, I'm not going to say how many, but this is all influenced by me as a little kid, with a bunch of kids online, taking the bus, the trip to the Hayden Planetarium, and then sitting in that chair and then looking up in the sky and going like, wow, this is crazy right here. So inspire that kind of stuff. Delphine is a teacher. If there's any other teachers out there, those kind of school trips to museums and places like this. Yesterday I brought 10 people in here from, they were like 2 people from New Zealand, 4 from Germany, 2 from London, and somewhere else I can't remember, but none of them were from the United States, the people that I brought here for a tour yesterday with me. And they were so happy just to sit here and look at this part of something that they enjoy and be so close to it, and to look and see the pictures and be here. To be in Brooklyn was a big thing for them. Because what happens is when people come from overseas, tourism tries to keep them in Manhattan, and they don't push the Brooklyn side of it. And this is, to me, is where a lot of the best culture is, right here in Brooklyn. Nothing against any other boroughs, but I enjoy Brooklyn's culture, and this is what it's all about. So thank you.
Watch this and other Brooklyn Independent Television episodes online at breakartsmedia.org/BIT.